Hey, this is Lok. Welcome to the Practisim Designer tutorial series. This video will cover grouping, measure, and fault lines. So let's look at grouping first. So when you drop targets on the system, you can very easily group them out into a collection of targets that you can reuse very easily. So for instance, if I'm going to drop this target here like this, and I want this to be a group that I can continue to use all the time, I can go over to grouping mode by going to mode and say grouping, or hit F4 on your keyboard. In grouping mode, you can then very quickly select what items you want in a group. So in groups, you have this concept of a parent object and then the child objects. So the first one you select, it will be the parents, the subsequent ones will be your child. And so if I want to group these two, let's say I grab this USPSA target, I click on this, and now I can select any other object in my design to be the child. So let's say I want to select this as a child, and you can keep selecting until once you're done with it, you just hit right click, and that will cancel the selection. And now if you go back to editing mode, you see that I have this group now that I can click and move around. The child can be moved on its own, but as a group, it will always be connected together when you move like this. Right? You can rotate it this way if you want to, and now this will always move as a group. So let's put this back here, and let's say if I always use this target presentation a lot, right? And I want this to be available in my personal inventory. I can, or if I want to share this with somebody, I can just do that. So for instance, if I select the parent of the group, and here the options are export group or add to inventory. So for instance, if I were to add to inventory, now if I go over to my prop menu in personal inventory, I'll see this group. I can very easily click on this. I can also add it to my shortcut bar. I can very easily just bring it down like that in the future. So that way you can have the same target presentation that you use very commonly in your stage design. You can also clone groups by just using the middle mouse button, selecting the object and hit the middle mouse button, or just delete the whole group by hitting delete by selecting the parent. You can also save this group by hitting Ctrl G, and then the result will be a file with a GRP file format. And then you can send that GRP file to somebody else, your friends, or upload it to some kind of site, whatever you want. And anybody who has access to the GRP can just go to File and import the group into the system from here. So that way you can share targets that you've designed, props that you've customized with anybody that you like. So that's grouping in nature. It's pretty straightforward. It's also very handy. It's a great quality of life feature. Next is measure. Let's go over the measure. So when you look at this floor, this is a standard grid. It's a 3 feet by 3 feet, or 1 meter by 1 meter approximately grid that allows you to place objects correctly. So for instance, if I want this to be 1 meter away from the other, 1 meter away, I can do that, and you know that it's approximately 1 meter. But in order to be more precise, you can use a measurement tool. Let's say, for instance, I place this here, and I place maybe a shooting box here, right? And then I place the popper over here. So there is a rule in USPSA that states that a competitor cannot shoot a steel target closer than 23 feet away. I don't really know what are the minimum distances for the other disciplines, but I'm sure there is a minimum established for safety reasons. I mean, one look here, you know that it's closer than 23 feet, right? You can use the grid, and this is basically just 2 yards away. But if, let's say, if it's out here and you're unsure what the distance is, you can use the ruler feature, measure feature. So if you go to mode, you see measure is F6. You can just click on this or just hit F6. So now in measure mode, it's very similar to activation mode, where you can click to establish the initial point and then drag the ruler to wherever you want to go. So for instance, if I want to measure from the tip of the shooting box to a particular object, I just click here and I drag the ruler out to that distance. As you can see, this is way less than 23 feet, so this is illegal. And you can, as you're dragging this, you can do diagonal, you can do whatever you want. But if you want to lock this to a certain, let's say I want to make this ruler straight, I can just hold down Control and you will just snap. You can snap every 45 degrees. So let's say I want to extend this to 23 feet. Let's go to 23. And so now you know that the popper should be set further than this line. So if you go over to back to editing mode, I can now drag this and move the popper to somewhere around here to make sure that it is beyond 23 feet or 7 meters in this case. So this is how you draw rulers on the stage. You can click and drag rulers around. You can rotate them. You can also change the length of the ruler in edit mode. Maybe you want to make it 5 meters, for instance. You can do that as well. Pretty flexible. So that's measure mode. That's how you drop rulers. You can also change the colors of the ruler. So just highlight the ruler and change it to maybe green, for instance. The last thing you want to talk about in this video is fault lines. Fault lines allows you to draw fault lines onto your stage design. Let me just delete this ruler to get out of the way. Instead of using shooting boxes, you can very easily draw fault lines. There are two ways of doing this. One is the old method, which is you go over to your stage markers, and there are a bunch of fault lines here that you can pick and choose. So pre-built ones that are 1 meter in length, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 feet, 6 feet, whatever. You can drop, let's say, 12 feet fault lines on the ground, and you can just place them here. You can rotate them around and so forth. But I prefer to use the new system, which is the fault line mode. So if you go over the mode and do fault lines, now very similar to rulers, you can click and drag fault lines. Let me just delete the shooting box. Let's say I want to do an L shape, maybe put a wall here like this, and I want to do an L shaped fault lines that goes up there so you can engage the popper, maybe, right? Something like that. It's not a valid stage, but I just want to show you and hope you understand the concept. So switch over to F7, which is draw fault line mode. I can just draw and click and drag fault lines. Again, I can hit Control to straighten the fault lines. I can very easily do this. Move around over here. Yeah, like that. There you go. Now you have an L-shaped fault line. It's also very handy, fault lines. You can draw a box. So instead of doing manually building your box, instead of doing like this 4 times, right? There is a handy tool. Oh, there's a handy tool now that allows you to do a box if you hold down shift. So if you click on this and you hold shift, it will automatically draw a box for you. So let's say I want a box with this size. Let's just drop it down and now I have a box. There we go. So that's how you can very easily build fault lines. So if you go over the editing mode, each of these fault line will be its own piece. You can reposition them anywhere you want. You can drag and reposition the fault lines if you want, like this. Right? Maybe, I don't know. You can do all kinds of interesting stage designs. Somebody asked me why can't I do curved fault lines. They're not really common at all, I think, in the sport, because it's hard to find sticks that are automatically curved, and most of the time you have to use multiple fault line segments to make your curve anyway. So I just made all fault lines straight, and so this is how you are able to build fault lines.